Senator Tester, welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you, Chairman Barrasso and Ranking Member Carper, and thank you to all the members on the committee. It is a pleasure to be here today to talk about this important legislation. And I also want to thank my colleague, Senator Daines, for sponsoring this important bill. In Montana and across this country, we are experiencing an historic wildfire season. A changing climate, historic drought, longer summer, a crippled Forest Service, resulting in a lack of forest management, turned Montana into a tinderbox, and all it took was Mother Nature to light it up, and she did. Over 1 million acres of Montana is burned, and we're not out of the woods yet. A dangerous and costly wildfire season forced the Forest Service to burn through much of their budget and already start the fire borrowing process. In its 2015 Cottonwood decision, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the Forest Service can be required to continuously update its forest plans to protect an endangered species, even if it has already consulted with the Fish and Wildlife Service, even if it has updated its forest plan, and even continues to consult with the agency for projects under this plan. This means that the Forest Service actively under that plan, from timber harvest to watershed restoration, could be put under an injunction for years while the plan is updated. And there's no guarantee that the plan won't need to be updated again and again and again as new species listed or habitat areas are changed. All the while, the forest goes unmanaged. The Cottonwood decision has already led to injunctions on 5 vegetation management projects in Montana alone. One of those, the Stonewall Vegetation Project, included fire mitigation work, and part of that burned this summer as well. Across regions 1, 2, and 4, at least 80 projects are at risk. This bill is targeted. It's a bipartisan fix to this court case. We need to support the recovery of endangered species. There's no doubt about that. But blocking forest management across the board is not going to help our forests. This legislation that you're going to consider today, the Litigation Relief for Forest Management Act, will help address the real and pressing issues for our Forest Service. It will help put saws in people's hands, cut trees, mitigate wildfire hazards, restore habitat, strengthen a timber economy, and maybe most importantly, maintain our forests. It will ensure the requirements to update forest plans make sense and that the Forest Service will be able to get started on their projects instead of being stuck in a constant bureaucracy and endless litigation. It will cut through red tape and allow for the Forest Service to spend more time in the woods and less time in the courtrooms. This legislation will help good forest projects move forward. These projects are carefully designed. They take input from Fish and Wildlife Service. They will take input from the public, and ideally, they will hold up in court. But the Forest Service, to get the job done and win in court, they need the resources to do the analysis. If the Forest Service spends over half its money in fighting fires, that is less money for responsible forest management. It is less money to create recreational access, to create watershed protections, and the due diligence that they need in order to succeed in court and produce a healthy forest. The Forest Service is already borrowing $300 million to cover firefighting costs this year. This depletion means they won't be able to responsibly manage our forests, making it harder to mitigate the impacts of wildfire. Sadly, the Senate seems incapable of addressing climate change in a responsible and tangible way, and I think that's a big problem. We may not be able to decide on how to tackle climate change today, but we should be able to give the Forest Service the tools they need to responsibly manage our forests. The Litigation Relief for Forest Management Act is a good start, but we will need to address the funding issues within the Forest Service as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Tester. Senator Daines, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Barrasso, Ranking Member Carper, for holding today's hearing on Senate Bill 605, my legislation with Senator Tester to increase active forest management by fixing a damaging court decision that just creates red tape and blocks much-needed projects on the ground with no benefit to the species. We burned over 1 million acres in Montana this fire season. In fact, the ranking member, this is the size of the state of Delaware. We lost...
Huge.
It is big. For in perspective, we lost 2 firefighters, too, in a sobering thought, that lost their lives in Montana fighting those fires. Let me say up front that this legislation codifies the legal position taken by the Obama administration. Leaders of the Department of Agriculture and Department of Interior under the current administration likewise have expressed support for the core elements of my legislation. There's a reason there's 2 Montanans in front of you today on the hearing. Montana had 2 of the 3 most expensive fires in the nation. I just saw the brief from Secretary Perdue yesterday, stacked, ranked the most expensive fires, the top 20. Montana, number 1 was the Lolo Peak Fire south of Missoula. Number 3 was the Rice Ridge Fire near Seeley Lake. Furthermore, Representative Mike Simpson and Representative Colin Peterson have introduced bipartisan companion legislation in the House. So we've got this from a bipartisan, bicameral viewpoint, as well as administrative support. It's also supported by dozens of organizations, several sportsmen, and conservation groups as well. Simply put, it has strong bipartisan roots and strong bipartisan support. Senate Bill 605 responds to the Ninth Circuit ruling in the U.S. Forest Service versus Cottonwood Environmental Law Center that the Forest Service is required to do an extra layer of plan-level consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services following the designation of critical habitat for the lynx species. To be clear, the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service were already conducting robust scientific analysis with regard to lynx habitat at the project level, so these agencies were and are fully committed to the conservation of the species. The Cottonwood ruling stands in contrast with a 10th Circuit ruling on a related case in 2007. Unfortunately, in 2016, October, the Supreme Court declined the Obama administration's petition to resolve the conflicting circuit court opinions, which effectively upholds the Ninth Circuit ruling. As highlighted by President Obama's Department of Justice, the Cottonwood ruling has, and I quote, the potential to cripple the Forest Service and BLM's land management functions. DOJ also highlighted that this decision substantially increases unnecessary paperwork requirements without any conservation benefit. And far from being just a case about the lynx, the Department of Justice noted that there are more than 850 listed species in the geographical area of the Ninth Circuit and emphasized the sheer volume of agency resources that would be required to adhere to the court's decision. We are seeing this firsthand in Montana, as the Forest Service is now prioritizing reconsultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the lynx first, above other work like grizzly bear consultation and permitting projects. Today, there are 5 forest management projects in Montana comprising over 150 million board feet of timber that have been blocked through injunctions due to the Cottonwood decision. These projects were designed to achieve critical objectives such as reducing the risk of wildfires, improving habitat, and protecting water quality. Several of these projects were developed through locally driven collaborative process that involved diverse stakeholders working together to improve forest health. And yet each one was stopped due to repeat fringe litigants capitalizing on the Ninth Circuit's disastrous Cottonwood ruling. And perhaps the most alarming example, and Senator Tetzschner just alluded to it, was the injunction of the Stonewall Vegetation Project near Lincoln, Montana. This project was enjoined this past spring, just days before the work was scheduled to begin. And about 1 month later, guess what happened? Fires broke out on some of the very acres that would have been treated under this project. While I can't say the project would have prevented the fire, the mere fact that wildfires occurred in areas that could not be treated due to the Cottonwood shows that we need to urgently pass my bipartisan legislation to statutorily reverse this decision. Senate Bill 605 simply clarifies that federal agencies do not need to do the extra layer of unnecessary consultation that is required by the Cottonwood decision. This will statutorily fix right now this conflict we have of the circuit courts. Removing this burden will allow federal agencies to have more time to complete preventive work on the ground while also creating good paying wood products jobs. I strongly believe this legislation, together with other management and wildfire funding reforms, should be passed into law this year. We say out in Montana, either we're going to manage the forests or the forests are going to manage us. I look forward to working with this committee and others towards that end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Daines. We appreciate you bringing forth this bipartisan piece of legislation and are very grateful for your leadership. Thank you.